Hello, Legal Helm listeners. Today on our show, I am talking to Andy Wilson. Andy is the CEO and co-founder of Logikcull, the leading eDiscovery cloud service used by over 1,500 organizations around the world. Andy, along with his co-founder, Sheng Yang, founded Logikcull around 10 years ago in Andy's Washington, D.C. dining room. Today, I'm going to be talking to Andy about how eDiscovery solutions can be leveraged by law firms and legal departments to deliver a significant return on investment. Andy, welcome to the show and thank you for taking time out to talk to me today.
Thank you, man.
It would be really good to help our audience and myself learn a little bit about you. So tell us about your journey that led you to Logikcull.
Yeah, sure. So quick point of clarification. We started in my dining room in DC in 2004. This is all pre-cloud. So imagine a 500 square foot condo and the dining room was not a dining room, but a data center.
Wow.
Like server racks and wires everywhere. We built our own cloud somewhat haphazardly and apparently illegally. Apparently it's not okay to have a data center in a condo building. So we eventually got out of there, but that's where we started in 2004 in DC, but that wasn't Logikcull. That was a large scale data processing service for mega litigation. So big banks and big law firms would hire us. And then we got the idea for Logikcull, which is the complete opposite of that. It's like anybody can do it. It's self-service. It's available to anyone during the Great Recession in 08 and 09. And then we launched Logikcull, the service, in 2013.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
When you were describing the servers on the dining room, it reminded me of a time early on in my career where I used to look after IT for Elite back in the days, but then got taken over by Thomson Reuters. It was really funny because we were basically expanding in Europe at that time. And we had two offices next door to each other. So they were physically like, one was on the other side of the road, but it was only literally like 100 or so yards away. And we spoke to the building owners and said, look, we're expanding. We need another office. The lady said, yeah, no problem. We've got a spare office on the other side. We were on the second floor. The other place was on the second floor. Moved a bunch of servers over to the other office, plugged everything in and tried to fire up our machines and nothing was connected to the internet. And we're like, oh, this is odd. Go back downstairs and the lady says to me, you do realize that the two offices are not actually physically connected to each other. And I was like, what? So in those days, Wi-Fi was like a new thing, right? So we literally spent about £2,000 on these wireless access points that you could kind of do point-to-point Wi-Fi. We were hanging out in the building, drilling them into the wall so we could get the two buildings connected. And we actually operated like that for probably about 3 years after that until we actually figured out how to connect the buildings together. But
Pre-cloud, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, we eventually moved out of the condo and we didn't stay there. We had a big office in Washington, D.C., right behind the White House. And to connect it to your story, there was one point where we spent an entire month where we dug up K Street to lay a fiber line to our data center in Ashburn, Virginia.
Wow. Fun time.
Nuts. Now we're all living in the cloud.
Yes, fun times for sure. So tell us a little bit about how is Logikcull changing the way eDiscovery is done for firms and legal departments?
Oh, wow. It's pretty dramatic. So the insight that we had in 0809 was there were two things that would eventually come to a head and it would affect pretty much everybody. And that was the data volumes for discovery are going to continue to grow. You know, we're on this exponential growth curve, right? The digital age. And the deadlines that legal and IT teams are under aren't going to move. So you have this movable object and this tsunami of data. And that's going to create a nightmare for the legal system. It's going to create a lot of backlog, which is already happening. You're seeing that all over the place. It's going to create a big pile of digital mess. And even a small case, you've got to go through maybe tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of emails and Slack messages and video files. And if you're doing that in a very manual way, there's no way you're going to meet your deadline. So it presents an access to justice problem. And that's where we got the idea for Logic. We're like, okay, this is going to be a big deal, right? Like this is the one thing that's not going to change 10 years from now, 20 years from now is data is going to continue to get bigger and more complex. And so therefore we need to build a service that anybody can use to do these modern discovery challenges and it won't break the bank or your brain. It can't be complicated. And that's where we got our mission of democratizing discovery. And so Logikcull is now used all over the world, over 70 countries, over 50,000 users, thousands of organizations have used it. And it's been pretty profound. One of the things that we hear often is it's leveled the playing field. So small firms now have big firm technology, right? Because we have customers ranging in size from individuals, like pro se litigants, up to the world's largest companies and government, and then everybody in between. They're all paying a different price, but they're fundamentally using the same technology. So if you think about that, the small firm, in many cases, they're actually better armed than the bigger firms, because the bigger firms are in a sunk cost fallacy mindset where they bought this antiquated software 10, 20 years ago. And so this smaller firm is using a very modern, flexible, scalable, affordable architecture. And they're oftentimes able to run circles around these big firms and get justice much faster. So it's pretty impactful.
You touched on something that at the forefront of a lot of technology companies' minds, which is around the implementation of new products, right? And I love what you just described in there. And it's kind of like how those smaller firms can be a bit more agile, right? Because the decision making is a little quicker. And like you say, they haven't invested as much in customizing the old system that they have that's so ingrained within the ecosystem of the firm, they can't change it easily, right? I'm just interested to dig into that a little bit more in terms of what is your approach to helping customers implement a product like Logikcull, right? Like, how do you take them on the journey to manage that change and you really, make a big impact from a software delivery perspective?
So there's a lot of nuance to that. First, I think you should know that Logikcull is all online on demand. So people come to us. So it's a very inbound driven. Almost all of our customers have come directly to Logikcull and signed up for the service. So that's number one. Number two is the product is designed to be incredibly intuitive. Like, it's modeled off of consumer products that people use every day intentionally, because they use those types of products more than they do big, hairy enterprise software. So, Amazon, LinkedIn, we did a lot of pattern matching from those types of products. And you can just sign up, put a credit card in, and start using it without talking to a single person. Now, no product is going to be perfect where you never have to do that. And so in addition to that, we provide world-class in-app chat support and by eDiscovery experts. So people that used to work as paralegals in big law firms or technical roles, these kinds of things. And they're at your side at any time to help answer any questions. And they often respond in under 2 minutes. And this is for all users all around the world. And you can ask them anything, jump on a Zoom call, et cetera. Because sometimes discovery can be quite complicated, even if you're experienced with it. But if you're new to it, if you're coming from an old world of kind of PDFs and paper, you're probably going to have a few questions to keep going. But it is pretty easy to use, where many times you don't even have to do that. You just do it yourself. Very good.
That's great. Great to hear. And it sounds like the very fact that it's cloud-based makes it super simple for people to kind of spin it up and give it a go, basically, right? And
yes. Yeah. 5 minutes done.
Yeah. Fantastic. That's really good to hear. So when people are thinking about eDiscovery, right, say I'm a firm who's got a manual process around eDiscovery, right? So I've got a little bit of tech maybe involved, but a lot of people-heavy approach to discovery. What would you say to firms like that to kind of get them thinking about return on investment, right? So if you're going to sign up to a product like Logikcull, how do they take that to their business decision makers to make sure that they are quantifying what that ROI is so that it becomes like an easy sell internally?
Yeah. So law firms, they got a great thing going with how they're leveraging at least Logikkull's eDiscovery, because the software is basically free. They bill it all back. The way we build the billing structure, it's so much like a Westlaw, like you get usage, right? And you can bill the usage to a client matter. And that's how law firms work. It makes sense. So almost 100% of our law firms bill the usage back from Logikcull to their client matters. And so they get full reimbursement. So that's number one. So you're basically getting world-class software and support, and you're not really paying for it. There's a little float there because they pay us directly. They put their credit card down. We charge the credit card, but then they get reimbursed. So that's number one. Number two is, and this is more true with smaller law firms, they realize that in addition to the fact that the software is often free to them, they can now use this software as another feather in their cap to get more business because they can take on more work. So these larger cases that would have gone to a much larger firm can now be done by a much smaller firm at a faster, more affordable, and more sophisticated way. So they take it as hey, listen, we can now handle more of your discovery work. And discovery work can be quite lucrative, as you know. Even if it's an hourly fee or contingency based. We just had a customer that won a multi-$100 million award using Logikcull. And they told us there was no way we could have done this case without Logikkull. This is a 15-person firm, right? That's huge. So there's 7-figure, potentially 8-figure outcomes that can happen by leveraging the right technology. And then the last thing is, if a law firm was doing eDiscovery in a manual means, They were probably also outsourcing complicated discovery to third-party vendors. Well, when you do that, you are also outsourcing the security of that data and all the time it takes to run that data. So you're outsourcing billable time that your paralegals could do. So when you cut that off and you bring it in-house, well, now the paralegals are the one doing the quote unquote third-party vendor work. Like they're creating the projects, they're uploading the data, they're running the searches, they're adding the users, they're building the reports, they're making the document productions. That's all very much credible billable time that adds to the firm's top line. So yeah, it's kind of a triple win for law firms. It's one of the reasons why we have so many of them, because why would you not want to use that? Free, yeah, be more competitive, make more billable time. That's a win-win-win.
Yeah, definitely. You talked a little bit about the user experience, right? So making it super simple to use, very intuitive to pick up a product like Logikcull and kind of run with it. Help us kind of dive into that a little bit more, because I'm very keen to understand some of those approaches that you're taking with maybe the customer audience or those other consumer products that you're kind of referencing to be able to build, a product that is so easy to use.
Well, it all starts with the data, because discovery without data is not discovery. And data can come in all shapes and sizes. It's really quite shocking. And I'll share some statistics on that in a minute. So if you are not very technical, like eDiscovery used to be a very technical task where you wouldn't want to touch it with a 10-foot pole. You outsourced it to eDiscovery experts because it was so incredibly complicated. I mean, if you go back in time, this is the way all technology starts. It's super complicated and then it becomes commoditized. People used to have an entire person's job to run the electricity at home, like turning on light switches, an electrical engineer in your house back when electricity was very complicated. And eDiscovery, I think, is no different. But now, anybody can do it. You can turn on a light switch. And so that starts with the data. So what we did is we wanted to make it so drop dead simple. And our idea was it has to be drag and drop easy. So if you have data of any size, any type, anywhere, you can just drag it into the internet. And then Logikcull magically does all the eDiscovery stuff that a vendor would do for you. That's it. There's nothing else. That took 4 years of hardcore software engineering because we had to automate the entire supply chain of what an eDiscovery vendor would do. And we know that because that's what we used to do. So we disrupted our own supply chain with this drag and drop model, and we had to make it so that it could scale. I mean, when's the last time you drag and dropped a terabyte zip file inside of the internet, right? Then that's not something you do. But that's something that people in eDiscovery do all the time. And so Logikcull can handle that. We see this every day. We just had a customer yesterday upload a 750 gigabyte zip file. And inside of that zip file are other terabytes of data because it's compressed. And so emails and spreadsheets and video files, and Logikcull finds all that, makes it all searchable for you, like highly, highly searchable. Like it will find, you ever see a PowerPoint document where it's got a screenshot on the page? Or a video file? You ever see those? Pretty common in business communication. Well, that screenshot, you can read it, but if it's not made searchable, how are you going to find it? Same thing with the video file. You can play it, but if the words haven't been extracted, how are you going to find it? The search box doesn't know it exists. In Logikcull, it does. So we invented a technology called deep text recognition that will mine every single file and find these little image fragments and say, oh, that's a screenshot on a PowerPoint document. Let's run that through optical character recognition, which is a form of artificial intelligence, to try and find out what the text is. And that could be handwriting, and it'll find it and it'll make it searchable. Same thing with an audio and video file. You have a voice message attached to an email. Logikcull will detect that and it'll run a transcription through it and get the text out of that. And it puts it in this beautiful interface where you can see what's inside the data. Similar to, you ever use LinkedIn people filters? Like where you can say, like, show me all the people that went to this school at this time. You just click buttons. It's the same thing in Logikcull. You can say, show me all the emails from Bim to Andy that mention podcasts. That's click, click, done. Easy peasy.
Very cool. And when you're considering the future, so some of the enhancements that you may want to do from a product perspective, tell us a little bit about that. Like, how do you kind of balance, the effort that's required to kind of evolve the product with what customers demand in terms of features and new bells and whistles that they may be requesting?
So the way we look at this is simply jobs to be done. Like, what are our customers trying to do inside of our product? And how can we make those jobs either irrelevant, where software will do them better, right? Or less tedious. And so if you think about like the world of discovery, it starts with the data. You've got to get the data in. We've made that simple. Now, there's other things that need to be built on top of that, like more integration. And we have a bunch of integrations in Google, Slack, Enterprise Grid, Microsoft 365, et cetera. But there needs to be a lot more. And so we're building integrations to the point where our customers can plug in anything they want, like a robot, which will be discoverable, like in the not too distant future, we're going to have robots take care of grandma, like that's going to happen. And occasionally those robots are going to mess up and somebody's going to sue the robot or the robot manufacturer. And you're going to need to do discovery on like what that robot saw and how is it handling the medication and the emails back and forth. Like those are going to do everything. And Logikcull is going to have to help assist with those things, because if you zoom out, and I tell my kids, I'm like, listen, kids, everything is discoverable now. Everything you do is now discoverable. So always keep that in mind. You don't want that discoverable content to be on the cover of a billboard one day for all the wrong reasons. So there's lots of integrations that need to happen. We have a ton of AI inside of Logikcull. It can do all sorts of things. It can find privileged communication automatically. Like you don't have to think. It just surfaces it up. It can find things like hidden files within other files and surface those things up that you would never see. That's actually how that judgment I just shared, like the multi-$100 million judgment, that's how they won the case. There was a hidden document that was literally the smoking gun, and Logikcull surfaces those things up. But because the data growth keeps going up and to the right, well, it's creating this noise to signal problem where the noise is so noisy that you have to use more and more AI to cull the noise. It's not enough to force people to run searches and click around. And so we're building some really interesting technology to automate the review of that data so that you can automatically cull it, move it aside, and then you just have like the essence left over. And that's coming soon.
Yeah, very, very cool. There's so much talk and buzz about some of the kind of AI tech that's out there now and more accessible, let's say. And it sounds like you guys have been at the forefront of putting some of that stuff in play early on, actually, before it became a thing. Tell us a little bit about where you see, so some of the firms that we speak to will have concerns around security, right? Like we all know the kind of headlines that law firms have kind of hit the headlines in terms of security. And with AI being present, it's available to us as like the good people, but also to the bad people to kind of promote hacking and all the other elements of it. What's your approach to security to make sure that, we're pushing this stuff into the cloud? Like, how do we kind of ensure that that is secure? And what are the implications of some of the AI kind of roadmap that you guys have in play for the future? Like where do you see this going in terms of the big picture, for eDiscovery in particular?
It's a really good question. I think every industry and technology is going to have to take a different path. There is no cookie cutter way. Some people are plugging into OpenAI and they're fine with that. We're not fine with that. I'll tell you why. So, security for a cloud company is really their top feature, because if you think about like what a cloud business does, you're just offloading the server and the storage, the compute and the storage to somebody else. So you're trusting them with your information, and therefore security and trust, are linked together, and that's it. Like if you lose that, you're toast. You're not going to have customers. Like, we've seen that in law firms, unfortunately, to your point, like they are sitting ducks. Like law firms went from being kind of a legal mind, if you will, like, asking information, you ask questions like, hey, now they become a legal database. And those legal databases are being hacked left and right. I think it's like 25% of all law firms have been hacked. And it's only going to increase because they weren't really ready for this, right? They didn't put in a lot of the security controls. And sometimes those are very expensive and complicated to do. And so it's no wonder that hackers are saying, instead of hacking this client of theirs who's invested hundreds of millions or billions of dollars in cybersecurity, I'll just go hack the law firm, which is easy to find. You come to Lex Machina or any tool online and do a reverse lookup, and you can see who all these people are. And not only do you get client A, but you get client A, B, C, etc. This happened with the Panama Papers. You remember that. But as it relates to AI safety, the way we're treating this for eDiscovery is you cannot, for eDiscovery, because of the sensitivity of the data, like these are like oftentimes front page news, right? Like things going on in elections and major scandals. You don't want to leak that information to some open AI. That doesn't make any sense. But the fundamental technology behind these new AI models are open source now. So LLMs, large language models, there's a variety that you can choose from. And so the way Logikcull works is we build an LM per customer. So it's like their brain, like their AI brain, and it's theirs. And eventually, and we're not there yet, but eventually there will be some form of LLM portability, right? Like, because if you were to use a service that is getting better and better and better over time because of all the data that you're putting into it, your data and your decisions. It's going to be hard for you to leave that service because you basically need to do a digital lobotomy. So there'll probably be some sort of law or rule or some innovation where it's easy for companies or customers to move from vendor A to vendor B without losing all that AI intelligence. I don't think we're there yet, but for us, and due to the sensitivity of what our customers do, we have to control tightly what happens within the account. We can't leverage a lot of these third-party products that build ourselves.
Yeah, makes sense. So with this kind of vast array of data, right? Like I think you touched on a few different integration points that are becoming more and more common, like Teams, like Slack, and all the other places that data is held. How do you keep up with that, right? Because it seems like there's a new way of kind of storing data somewhere.
Whack-a-mole problem.
Yeah. Is that one of the biggest challenges, like in terms of making sure that we have the ability to be able to integrate with, as many systems that could hold such data for eDiscovery?
Hey, John, how do I find out what we've invoiced my client?
How can I view my outstanding WIP? How do I submit my expenses again?
Do we have next Monday off?
Monday off?
It's exciting to have fresh faces at your law firm, but onboarding them takes a lot of time and a lot of energy when everyone is remote. You're busy enough as it is. Helm 360 has the solution. Just ask Termi, Helm 360's next level chatbot solution for knowledge management. Termi can answer many of your new hires' questions for you without distracting you or anyone else at the firm. This means fewer frantic emails, fewer help desk tickets, more time and more focused productivity for everyone at the firm. Working with Termi, you can have those eager new employees up to speed in a snap. They may never need to ask you a question again. Check out helm360.com/Termi to see Termi in action and find out how it can make onboarding new hires as easy as sending an email.
Yes and no. So yes, there's different sources of data, but if you look at the categories of data, there's not that many. So as an example, let's look at email. There's essentially two. There's Gmail and Microsoft in the business world. That's basically what people use. But the underlying technology behind email is RFC. And this is like an open model, right? So if you go and build another email client, you're just going to use that. You have to use that. Look at documents, right? There's only a certain types of documents. The concept of a document is changing because it used to be I create a document and then I share it maybe with one other person. Now it's a very collaborative and you might have components, plugging into it. That is actually pretty interesting as it relates to discovery. Then you have chat, right? So chat is things like Slack and Teams, and there's dozens of others, but it's just chat. That's the category. So the bigger challenge is not necessarily handling that data. It's building the integration so that people can get access to it very easily. And the way we're approaching this is like, there's no way we're going to be able to build infinite number of integrations ourselves. Like it doesn't make any sense. So we're flipping it around where our customers or partners can build their own integration using our tools, our APIs that we've built because Logikcull has it's a processing beast. Like just today, Logikcull will probably process a couple 100 million pages of content. When I say process, I mean deduplication, optical character recognition, metadata extraction, text extraction, hidden file extraction, and dozens of other things that we're doing to this data. It's a very large compute problem. Those are all APIs that in the not too distant future, customers and partners can build on. And so they're going to be the ones building those integrations and not us. And I think that's how you ultimately have to solve this problem because it will be an infinite whack-a-mole challenge.
I want to switch gears a little bit and talk a little bit about the company. And obviously you've co-founded the company and built what looks like a really interesting brand around what you do. And there's definitely a fun element to it, right? When I was reading up about Logikcull and some of the stuff that you do, I think I saw a little video of you dressed as Neo from Matrix flying around and that being published in a release note. And I actually laughed, right? I don't think I've ever looked at a release note and actually wanted to read the rest of it to see what else was going on in there. Tell us a little bit about that. Like, where did that come from? And how does it kind of impact the way that kind of company culture comes about?
Thank you for reading our release notes, by the way. They can be really funny. I read them and chuckle every time. I don't write them, but anyway. So the reason why our brand and our marketing is that way is if you look at the legal industry, it's known as like serious business, right? Like as it should be. And if you look at the competitive landscape, like we did, and we're like, okay, how do we stick out? I think Seth Godin talks about the purple cow. How do you become the purple cow? Well, for us, it was pretty obvious. It's like, we need to be disruptive with humor and creative, around that. And so that's what we do, So we have our own wine. We've been making wine for over a decade. Nobody else does that. It's called Redaction and Whiteout. So there's a lot of puns in our marketing. We have an entire t-shirt store of, I don't know if you saw that, but there's a lot of really great t-shirts for legal people. You should check that out. And then our advertisements are designed to disrupt your patterns, right? So recently we were in New York for Legal Week, big, conference. And we had these trucks going around the hotel where the conference was. And there was a big ad on it. And it said eDiscovery. And then the middle section was redacted. And then the bottom said sucks. So, yeah, and people are thinking the redacted version is some sort of profanity. And if you went to eDiscovery-sucks.com, you can click on that redaction to see what's actually behind it. And so we have to make people stop and think, because the legal industry is such that they're just on rails. Like, it's the status quo, and you've got to shake them out of it, because we know if they stay on this status quo line, it's not a straight line. It's straight to hell. Like, it is going to be a digital hell for them if they do not change their ways. Like, law firms could go out of business if they make these mistakes and they continue to do things manually or outsource it to third parties. And so that's one of the reasons why we have to do it. So our mission is to disrupt and democratize, because we don't think we can democratize this space without disrupting. That's why all that stuff is there.
Yeah, I love it. Honestly, it's kind of refreshing, right? I remember going to an eDiscovery conference, vendor conference. This is a few years ago. Walking into that space, and literally every booth was exactly the same. Like, it was all like blue and white branding. It was just like a blend. They could have just been the same company, right? And I think this is the first time actually in a very long time where I see a brand in our space in legal tech that actually stands out because of some of the fun stuff you're doing. So you're doing a great job there. You definitely got my attention. So
thanks. More to come. We got a lot of fun stuff cooking.
Yeah, it's working. It's working. So just sticking with the theme of your growth as a company over the years since you founded it, talk us through that journey a little bit more in terms of the people, right? Because obviously behind every company, there's a bunch of great people that are kind of making things happen. What was your approach to building that talent pool and really executing on the strategy and the vision that you had in the beginning, right? To go and disrupt the market?
Yeah, that is a great question. I don't think enough people think about that, because a company, as you've said, is just a group of people. And the way we think about it is the team you build is the company you build. And I say this a lot. And so you have to work backwards from that. So, like, you need to define what kind of company you want to build, right? And then that will inform the type of people and the culture that you need to create that company. And I don't think people think enough about that. So we look at that and we say, okay, we want Logikcull to be a world-class company. We want people to love working here. We want our customers to love using the service and tell other people, because at the end of the day, like, great products, how do they grow? They grow by word of mouth. I mean, think about a great product you recently used. You probably told multiple people about it, whether you know it or not. Like, you probably did that. And so in order for us to do that, when we started thinking about our team, you have to craft values, right? Okay, well, what are the values that we need inside of people that they share or can enhance? And so you have to filter through values first. That is critical. Like, too many people look at skill and not enough values alignment. You have to do both. Don't get me wrong. You absolutely have to do both. You can't just have somebody who's aligned with your values, but can't do the job. That's not going to be helpful. But it is a values first decision-making structure. And we have 5 values in Logikcull. They're very easy. They're designed to help everybody make decisions on everything, from hiring to firing to building products to how you treat customers. I mean, that's how you should do it, in my opinion. And so, when we look at, building the team, we have a very strict funnel. We don't hire a lot of people intentionally. We're in the golden era of technology companies where there's so much leverage through other technology that you don't need to hire a lot of people to do these tasks anymore, because AI and automation is everywhere. It's in abundance, right? And to some extent, maybe intelligence in general, like, the cost of that is going to zero. If you look at some of these recent developments in AI, like Auto GPT as an example, like, imagine what that can do just in a few short years. There's a lot of back office functions that historically would have been done by people. So that's how we think about it. It starts with the company you want to build, the mission that you're trying to achieve, the values, and then you pattern match to the right people on the recruiting front.
Wonderful. I'm guessing that over that time, there was also some big challenges, hurdles that you had to overcome.
No, it's easy just smooth sailing, Ben. No problems at all.
Yeah.
It's just up and to the right, not a roller coaster ride.
Tell us, is there anything that you can kind of share in terms of challenge that you faced in the building of Logikcull and how you kind of overcame it?
You're talking to somebody who's been running this company for 20 years. There has been many existential challenges, many near-death experiences. Oh my God. I'll tell you one that happened pre-Logikcull that is terrifying. Okay. So we were running a services business, right? Working on huge litigation. And then we were also taking all that money and investing it right back into the company to build Logikcull. We bootstrapped it. Right. We eventually raised venture capital, but we originally bootstrapped everything. So we had this seesaw business model, which is, if I had known what I know now, I'm pretty sure we would not be having this conversation because it is not for the faint of heart. So we're running out of cash, right? And it's not a great market. I think this is like 2010, 2011, but we had this opportunity with Bank of America. Bank of America had this rapid fire problem where they needed to process all these loan documents for an intense government investigation into one of the acquisitions that they made. I believe it was Countrywide Financial. And it was over 100 million files. And they needed to be indexed and branded, like endorsed, in a week's time. And they contracted this law firm to try and find a vendor to do it. Nobody could do it. And they called us and they said, hey, we know you guys are smart. You've got engineers. Can you solve this problem? And I say, yes, without knowing anything about it, because we were in such a desperate situation where we were looking at a cash zero date about a month and a half from now. Like my co-founder and I were already not taking us out. And we had been doing that for a month, right? And we were the sole breadwinner of our families at the time. So it was dire straits situation. And they said, okay, great. How much do you think this is what's the estimate for the cost? And the number I needed to have in order to make payroll and get over the hump was $250,000. And I said, $250,000. And they said, okay. I was like, all right, cool. So we get the job. We spend an entire week working through the night, writing software to parallelize the processing of terabytes of data, right? To do this task. It was incredibly complicated. A lot of sleepless nights, literal sleepless nights. And I'm getting to the point where we almost died. So we finished the job and they call us and say, we need to make multiple copies of this data and we need to ship it to San Francisco and the DOJ. And we need to have this done. And this is like Easter weekend, right? We need to have this done by Easter week. Like, okay. So we had this machine that we hadn't used in a long time. It's like imagine like a metal box and you can plug a hard drive into it and you can copy it to multiple hard drives. So you can set up like 10 hard drives to make a copy. We hadn't used this thing in years. It was probably made in, Russia, like 30 years ago. I mean, it was one of these machines and we didn't have the instruction manual. The company was out of business. So we got these hard drives. We plugged the master one in and the user interface to make the decision on whether or not to copy or delete was rabbit or turtle. That was it. There was no words. It was literal icons, rabbit or turtle. And we forgot which one it was. And we didn't have any we were up against the gun. Businesses were closed. We couldn't buy more hard drives. We had the exact amount. We were idiots and we couldn't make a mistake. And we literally flipped a coin on what it should be to copy the drives. And we chose rabbit. It had a big copy, then it didn't delete. If it had deleted that drive, then all that work would have been destroyed, completely destroyed. It worked. We got the hard drives cloned. We had one of our employees get on a red-eye flight. We bought a first-class ticket for him to San Francisco. He walked in with one of those like secure cases, lock secure cases of the hard drives and delivered. And then we got paid, I think, a couple weeks later. And there we go. That was one. There's others, but that was one.
Wow. Amazing. Thank you for sharing that. That's such an amazing story. And glad you chose the rabbit.
Yeah, it was nuts. Absolutely nuts.
Excellent.
Anyway.
Thank you very much. So if I can just kind of switch to some wrap-up questions, if I may. This has been a great conversation, by the way. I think I could carry on talking to you for probably another hour. We'll do that maybe on another day. So tell me, if you could borrow Doctor Who's time machine and go back to yourself at 18 years old, what advice would you give to yourself?
I would probably say spend more time thinking about the people that you will enjoy working with. and hold a high bar. We talked a little bit about it earlier on company building and values and team. This is not the way I've always looked at it. And I made a lot of mistakes early on, not thinking enough about that, not thinking about that simple trope of the team you build becomes the company you build. And so if you don't think enough about that, you're going to build the wrong team. Like that's going to happen. And there were times where we did that and it's costly. When you bring on the wrong person, it can kill your company. And it almost did, a few times. That would be my one piece of advice because I always wanted to build a company. And I did. I built multiple companies when I was a kid and after college, nothing to the scale of this, obviously. That would be the one thing. I would be in a very different place today if I had that type of skill.
Very cool. Good advice. Next question is, with all of the kind of information, kind of prudent talk about this because of the nature of the product that you have, but we have so much data being thrown at us, right, on a day-to-day basis. And I'm sure in running your organization, you're balancing and juggling a lot of different things. Is there any like kind of tips, productivity hacks that you use that have helped you stay on top of stuff?
Oh man, that's like a whole nother podcast episode. Yeah, I'm constantly auditing my own self to see where my time is going. You're not going to get more time, right? So you spend it and it's gone. So spend it wisely. Like is it a good use of time to constantly be replying to emails? No, that's not. I'm so much looking forward to Bim when my email can just write the emails for me, which we're pretty close to doing that. Like I use a product called Superhuman, which is a great product if you're using email because it makes the ability for you to quickly go through email. It's so easy. I mean, you got to be pretty proficient with keyboard shortcuts, but it's a great product. And they just announced some incredible things around automatic email creation and replies using AI. So there's that. One thing I would recommend, and this is maybe more so for teams that are distributed, because Logikcull is a highly distributed company, is to do more asynchronous information share. Let people consume the information when they want to consume. And I use a few tools for that. I do a lot of video recordings. So I use Loom. I use a product called Use Bubbles. These are like really quick hits where you can just click a button, start recording, explain what it is you're trying to convey, and then you share the link out to your team. I use Slack messages a lot, audio messages in Slack. I don't know if you've used that before. Those are great. And the other benefit to these things are you don't even have to listen to them anymore because they're automatically transcribed. But if you do listen to them, you can change the speed to 1.5 or 2x. That takes a little getting used to. And by the way, that becomes a really weird thing. If you do it too much and then you talk to that person in a synchronous way, you're like, why are they so slow? What's wrong with them? You're like, oh, it's because I listened to their stuff at 2x the speed and they sound like a robot. But if you train your mind to consume that level of information very quickly, you will save an enormous amount of time, a compounded amount of time. It's pretty incredible. There's a great chart from, what's that website? XKD, that one. It's like they have all the memes and stuff. But it shows this time chart of like, you plot like, okay, how many times do you do this task, right? A day, a week, a month. And then how long does it take to do the task every time? And then it will show you how much time you're going to spend doing that task. And so any task that you're doing repetitively, you should pause and think about that chart, maybe do the math, and then think about ways that you could automate it, because the more time you can save through these rote tasks, the more time you can spend on higher priority work.
Fantastic. Really good tips there. Thank you for sharing. If people in our audience want to contact you to learn more about the product or speak to you, what's the best way to get in touch?
Well, the company's website is logikcull.com. So LOGIK, it's important, CULL.com. And then for me, I'm pretty active on Twitter at IDDoop or LinkedIn. I post there quite a bit, about not a lot of promotional things, just some interesting insights that I see on the front lines of, AI and company building, those kinds of things. But yeah.
Brilliant. And any closing thoughts or advice that would benefit our legal professionals in our audience?
Yes. AI is just a tool. The bait stamp was just a tool. Before the bait stamp, people wrote the numbers of bait stamp on, and that's why they created the bait stamp, to make this tedious work less tedious. And now all that's automated. There's bait stamps don't exist anymore, as far as I know. Although it probably does. There's probably some poor clerk out there just changing the bait stamp and stamping those pages. So I think you got to think about AI as just another tool and embrace it, learn about it, try it out. There's so many different AI tools out there, and figure out how you can incorporate it safely into the work that you're doing for your clients or whoever. It doesn't really matter, but just think about it as a tool, and I wouldn't be afraid of it. I think the people that are too afraid of it will be slow to adopt it. And they're probably going to be the ones that are most at risk, because it's the people that adopt these tools, learn them the best, that will succeed. It's just like anything, like farmers and tractors. It's no different. It's just that this time, I think that's scary, is that it's knowledge work that's being disrupted. Just imagine what farmers felt when they saw the first tractor. That's what like knowledge workers are seeing now. They're like, oh my God, this AI writes better than I do, but that's my job. I write. Like, yeah, you're going to have to adapt just like everybody else.
Yep. Very true. Don't fear it, embrace it.
That's right. Exactly.
Andy, it has been an absolute pleasure talking to you today. Thank you again for taking some time out to speak to me, and hope to speak to you again soon.
Yeah. Thank you, Bim. Appreciate it.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode of the Legal Helm. Thank you as always for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please like and subscribe on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. It really helps us out.